Welcome to my Shadow of the Erdtree boss rankings. These are my personal preferences and not remotely objective, so I'd be interested to hear your rankings in the comment below if you want to drop them. I'm basing these off of pure feeling, so there's no need to discuss mathematic criteria or anything like that. Let's just dive right in. I'm not going to rank Radahn. First of all, complaining about him has become de rigueur, and I've done it myself already in my Shadow of the Erdtree review, so I don't want to do it again too extensively and be too negatively. Second of all, no other boss would move in the rankings so much with so few tweaks. The entire problem with the fight hinges on the triple slash. Its rapid discharge and undodgeability at neutral position, except at the extreme left, force you to spend most of the fight dodging leftward, greatly curtailing player freedom and choice. With that move removed, you'd be able to vary your directionality a lot more, and I think it would vault the fight from an A or S tier 1. So I'm quarantining Radahn here and just going with a top 10. In last place I'm putting Commander Gaius, but this is a good time to say that this last place is actually a testament to the strength of this boss lineup, because if I were doing a tier list, I'd put him in the B slot. So in my book, the weakest of the main bosses is nonetheless a solid B, which is awesome. The amount of vitriol and contempt leveled at Gaius in the community of players is puzzling in the extreme. Gaius might not, in my opinion, have a ton to recommend him, but neither does he have a galaxy of demerits. He's fine. His charge attack is a little counterintuitive and maybe a little bit janky, but it's nothing a little trial and error can't solve. Pick a fixed marker to mentally pin different dodges to. I chose the tip of his tusk, and I said to myself, what if I dodge this far from his tusk, or that far? Pretty quickly, I found that hitting the dodge button right before I came into contact with the tip of his tusk worked perfectly, and it hasn't been a problem since. Gaius has some moves that are genuinely fun and inventive. His big multi-hit combo features a neat hitbox exploitation in which a singular dodge on a light roll can negate consecutive attacks from Gaius and his boar. He punishes you for attempting to stay on his ass, but not with such rapidity that it prohibits any engagement in that region at all. All parts of the animal are in play, but not so in play that you can really spam any one area. This is a fight that demands constant motion and repositioning, which is always a welcome infusion of dynamism. As far as personal preferences go, however, I often dislike mounted enemies because I find them boxy and a bit awkward, and Gaius does suffer from this defect. Because the boar itself is one of the primary attack vehicles, you have to dodge a big, chunky rectangle, which diminishes the elegance that fights with human enemies tend to have. Contrast this with, for example, Roya Knight Loretta, who, while mounted, nonetheless engages primarily with a long weapon that extends well beyond the horse's body, or with ranged magic. This allows a mounted fight, in her case, to maintain the fluid dynamism of a humanoid fight. So, because of the somewhat infelicitous mechanics, Gaius is probably my least favorite boss. Meteor has a lot to recommend her, and she should claim a higher spot on this list. I like the circuitous route you have to take to get to her. I like how much of an absolute freak she looks like. I like her hybridity. Her big lumbering body slams belie her ability to move swiftly and speedily across the arena, thus fostering a mixed pacing to this fight that keeps it fresh throughout. Complementing the lore, her magic attacks create what's essentially a mini galaxy, with cosmic orbs that explode and pulses of laser beams that mimic quasars. It's visually spectacular and mechanically up to snuff. However, she has one element that I am thoroughly philosophically opposed to, and that's moves that are undodgeable without an Ash of War. Her opening revolving laser blast does not appear to be evadable through any normal means other than using an Ash of War like Raptors of the Mist. If Angbal can't do it, it's probably safe to say it's not really possible. This shouldn't be acceptable outside the context of a lore-specific mechanic for which we're given a unique, purpose-built item, such as Mohg's Nihil attack, and the crystal tier, or cracked tier, that can mostly negate it. Here, I should note that my amazing community and I part ways slightly. In a poll I did, they voted to invert the places of Metyr and Gaius, placing Metyr 10th and Gaius 9th. In 8th place, it's the Putrescent Knight. The Putrescent Knight is Commander Gaius's gaunter, cooler cousin. Decidedly less robust, he nonetheless has some of the same issues with respect to his horse that Gaius does. The aesthetics of the fight elevate him for me, though. The rich, velvety purple of St. Trina carpets an otherwise eerie and cavernous arena, as rich with maneuverability as it is with color. The knight himself gives off major Hollow Knight vibes, and no one can convince me that there isn't an intentional homage woven in here. So too is there with his weapon, this time an obvious reference to both the Orphan of Kos and to a certain extent the Elden Beast. As above, so below, they say. The Putrescent Knight utilizes branching combos that require fairly precise pattern recognition to ensure proper differentiation of your responses, a skill that will serve you well throughout this DLC. He moves around quite a bit, but unlike an enemy like Elden Beast, he never flits off too far, such that it feels like you're just sitting around. Positioning is also important in this fight, as he has a definite dominant side that is much more amenable to player engagement, but that he's reluctant to present to you without active effort on your part. The blue ice mixes up any potential monotony, requiring sometimes lightning fast, sometimes delayed, and sometimes mixed response timing. Overall, it's an engaging fight with extra cool visuals and excellent music, a definite A tier for me. A quick note to hit that subscribe button if you like my content. I make a wide range of Soulsborne content on this channel. I do analysis and video essays like this one. I do boss explanations, I do guides and walkthroughs, and I do challenge runs like no-hit videos. So please join our community if you enjoy what you're watching so far. I'm giving the 7th place spot to Erdtree Avatar. I really enjoyed the Sunflower. After fighting so many absolutely horseshit flower enemies in the base game of Elden Ring, this genuinely interesting and fun fight was a breath of fresh air, which is ironic given the stagnant miasma in which we find it. The decrepitude of the Erdtree Avatar mimics that which it stands in for, so the environmental storytelling here is quite on point. Thorns and branch and body slams are the mainstays of this fight, but we get shades of the Erdtree Avatar bosses in the holy projectiles as well. These projectiles are a metonymy for the fight as a whole and its differences from the Erdtree Avatar bosses, as they're amped up from the projectiles the base game avatars use. In the base game, you can simply outrun these projectiles, but the ones here are much more intense, long, and complex, coming in multiple waves and requiring more aggressive evasion. It's yet another brilliant irony that the Erdtree Avatar is simultaneously much sicker and much more robust than its non-accursed counterparts. The fight itself is remarkable for featuring a large enemy for which the camera doesn't actively work against you. The charge attacks look like a dog rubbing its butt against a carpet, which I find weirdly endearing, and the option to end each phase with a critical hit that will in turn hack off a chunk of health in the next phase is a unique mechanic that I really liked. It's not the most memorable boss in the world, but it's one I absolutely look forward to on a subsequent playthrough. Next up, it's Romina, Saint of the Bud. Romina is a phenomenal fight, but she's been slighted by the developers. She deserves better than she's gotten. Given that she's the penultimate boss, a greater sense of anticipation and gravitas should have been cultivated throughout the level. She certainly should have had a cutscene with dialogue to give us more context and to engender an epicness appropriate to the second-to-last boss. Nonetheless, what we do have is still great. In my opinion, she has the best OST in the DLC. Romina has a relatively limited moveset, but she compensates for this with the complexity of the moves she does have. Her combos utilize body parts and weapon attacks, and these unconventional hitboxes chained together in quick succession demand problem-solving and experimentation. Her aerial spin features another one of those hitbox exploitations, allowing you to dodge once despite appearing to require a number of dodges. The little scintillations of wrought butterflies is such a great touch as well. It adds a visual beauty to the fight That partially cushions the eye from the absolute monstrosity that we're up against, and it also links her securely into the lore, which is often signposted through the use of different species of butterflies. Romina does suffer from a Meteor problem, though, and that's her phase transition. This transition is both untelegraphed and undodgeable at close range. You cannot escape in time if you're near her once it begins, and you have no sign that tells you that it's about to begin, so you're kind of fucked. So the only way to avoid damage is to time a critical hit roughly near the center of the health bar, or to attack from range when you start getting to that point. It doesn't ruin the fight for me because of these options, but much like with Meteor, this kind of move is really anti-player, and we should be opposed to its incorporation into future boss fights as a community. Rolana comes in 5th for me. With Rolana, I need to provide a full disclosure. This fight turned out to be an absolute nightmare for me to no-hit, and I'm almost positive she could claim a higher spot in a subsequent playthrough outside of a challenge run context. Currently, I'm somewhat traumatized by her, so that's my own bias. Still, I'm easily calling her an A-tier boss, just putting her 5th. As I said in a recent video, Rolana takes the aesthetics and aggression of Pontiff Sullivan and injects them with the more sensitive AI and kaleidoscopic combo trees of Elden Ring. She offers ample opportunities for jumping and strafing, and her branching combos that begin similarly spur the player to develop strategies for either differentiating on the fly or innovating responses that work for multiple endings. The carrion sword and swipe are absolute joys to dodge, and the phalanx usually works but can sometimes be problematic if it's timed improperly and overlaps with another attack like the carrion sword. Then you can kind of be fucked, but that doesn't happen too often. Her phase 2 is bananas in all the right ways, an overawing spectacle that conceals the clean transition from phase 1 lurking beneath the surface. She very much reminds me of the Abyss Watchers here, who reused the same moveset in phase 2 as in phase 1, but whose addition of fire creates the initial impression of something entirely new and overwhelming. Rolana has a Romina problem, though, in that her lack of a cutscene and dialogue seems pretty inexplicable and frankly unbecoming of someone so important and so epic. We shouldn't have to wait until we get her armor and round table hold after she's already dead to learn that she's not just a carrion princess, but actually Renala's sister. Divine Dancing Lion was the dark horse in this ranking for sure for me. I didn't expect to like him as much as I did. The lion has a very nice cutscene, and then the top-notch music kicks in, gesturing towards the heritage from which From Software clearly took inspiration here. Like a good number of bosses in this DLC, the lion has an ability to jolt, jerk, and lumber, while also gliding and flitting and slicing through the air with wispy acrobatics. Its often counterintuitive timings straddle the line between a challenge and a nuisance, never veering from the former into the latter. One thing I especially appreciate is the way the lightning phase unveils itself slowly to be much more tameable than it appears at first blush. I've said for years, and from my very first video that I made on this channel, that what I love most about FromSoft fights is the dawning cognitive clarity that comes with repeat attempts. Initially, all you see is a whirl of illegible chaos that you can't imagine ever processing. But slowly your brain begins to comprehend it until it almost feels like the fight is moving slower than it was the first time you experienced it. When I went up against the lightning phase for the first time, I thought it was downright broken. Only when I realized that a constant state of backward motion would not only put you out of range of the delayed explosions, but would also open up counterattack windows even though you're moving backwards because he's moving with you. And only then did I truly appreciate the mechanics of this fight. Here, I want to give another shout out to my community, who voted to swap Rolana and Lion, making her 4th and Lion 5th, which I think is perfectly understandable and might actually be what happens to me when I replay the game. In 3rd place, it's Midra, an absolute masterpiece that feels lifted directly out of Dark Souls 3. And for my top 3, I might be saying a little bit less just because I have entire videos devoted to them that you can check out. Midra isn't the most complicated boss, but he's the one that most recreates that feeling of a carefully choreographed dance that distinguishes the Dark Souls series that some of us older fans of the franchise love so much. The aesthetics are dope. The Frenzy Flames integration of bright and lurid hues of orange, yellow, and red are eye-catching in the extreme. Midra has a core set of moves around which he pins a number of variations, thus maintaining a dance-like tempo with engaging and fun ornamentations. Midra is a medium-speed boss, featuring some moves that require double dodging at the extreme end of the spectrum, but overall maintaining a pace that allows for a more mental equilibrium than a fight like Radahn does. The mix of magic attacks and melee attacks is perfectly balanced here. Midra also offers a number of excellent opportunities for counterattacks, and I was able to use the Poison Flower Blooms twice Ash of War on a great katana to both close distance and inflict heavy poise damage, a great boon given how tanky Midra becomes in his unofficial 2.5 phase. He also presents a high degree of player customization, prodigal with opportunities for non-rolling evasion. His main combo can be strafed, and the ability to crouch beneath his aerial spin attack may just be the single most satisfying theater of defense in the entire game. Set to a killer soundtrack, this fight is a slam dunk all the way. I've spoken at length about Bale in several videos at this point, but he's become my favorite From Software dragon. Admittedly, the overall landscape is pretty crappy on this score, but there are some standouts in the modern catalog in Midir and Placiduous Axe. And while I adore Midir, Bale has the edge in my book. Bale recaptures Midir's ferocity and adopts certain moves from him that happen to be the best in Midir's catalog. His attack patterns draw, however, from Dark Souls 3 as a whole, not just Midir. He slaloms between heavy and light, lumbering and swift, with a slick grace that makes these dichotomies fit together rather than feel haphazardly slapped together like they so easily could have. In this sense, he's reminiscent, as I said in my Dark Souls 4 video, of Dragon Slayer armor. I neglected to mention in that video that he's perhaps even more reminiscent of Champion Gundyr, whose arrhythmic but smooth motion maps onto Bale's various wing swipes and tail swings. This creates an uneven tempo that looks visually disarming and feels fresh and engaging. The arena is incorporated to the perfect extent, with pillars of electricity and lava in Phase 2, requiring some deliberate footwork without ever devolving into an overwhelming frenzy. Phase 2 is visually stunning, with the lightning fire some of the most cinematic in the entire franchise. His aerial fire strafe looks cool beyond belief, and his explosion takes Placiduous Axe's move even down to the way the music pauses, but improves upon it by making it dodgeable. There are some downsides that I hope get fixed in a patch. I see the vision for how they want the camera to work, which I discuss in my Dragon comparison video, but in its current iteration, it's not always successful. Frustratingly, his opening fire breath is also inconsistent for dodging, and his Phase 2 transition can see him disappear beyond the cliff's edge, causing you to lock off and become disoriented, all while the fireball magically quantum teleport through the wall. Nonetheless, these are cosmetic blemishes on an incredible fight as a whole. Claiming the gold, surprise surprise, it's Mesmer. After making an entire video about him, I'm not sure I have a ton to add here. He's visually and mythically top-notch, executed with pitch perfection. He has very few tools in Phase 1, but through the genius of design, he's able to create a vast library of moves and combos with those tools. Like Radahn, branching combos for strategization, and aerial fire spins, sweeps, and spears marry aesthetics and technically sophisticated mechanics. The fight is dynamic, faster than Midra's, but still very much in the dance choreography vein that defines him. Phase 2 introduces a snake fight that so easily could have become farcical and campy, but makes it terrifying and grave. The hitboxes are designed perfectly, such that even though they're large and bulky, they're perfectly natural to dodge. They have the same smooth but slightly arrhythmic timing as Phase 1. When you couple that with some carried over moves from the first phase, you have a second phase that looks 100% different, but also feels 100% the same mechanically and cognitively. This is a level of brilliance difficult to pull off. It means you have a technical unity between the two phases, but nonetheless have visual variation. It's a fight that's simultaneously cohesive and diverse, And really, what more could you ask for? So yeah, these are my rankings of Shadow of the Erdtree's main bosses. I hope you enjoyed it and will let me know, respectfully, your rankings in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.